like you to meet. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use.
There are certain films that appear less as entertainment and more as thresholds. Portals into a different vision of what cinema and imagination can be. Tron. Ares is one of those rare events. A film that arrives not merely as a sequel but as a reclamation of the digital dream first sparked more than 40 years ago. When audiences first entered the glowing corridors of the grid in 1982's Tron, they glimpsed a new frontier of computer-generated imagery, a vocabulary of light and geometry that spoke to the future of storytelling. Decades later, Tron Legacy carried that vision forward with sleek modernity and emotional nostalgia. Now in Tron, Ares, Disney, and director Joachim Running attempt something even more audacious, to bring that synthetic universe crashing into the real world, both within the story and in the craft of filmmaking itself. From its conception, Tron Ares was envisioned as an inflection point for the franchise. It was to ask a question that had hovered over the series since its beginning. What happens when the boundaries between the digital and physical dissolve completely? The original film imagined the computer as a realm we could enter. This one imagines the digital coming out to meet us. At its heart lies the character of Ares, a program built to cross that threshold, a creation of code that becomes flesh, consciousness, and conflict. In Jared Leto's hands, Ares is not a machine learning to be human, but a mirror held up to humanity's obsession with perfection. The story of his birth and rebellion plays out against the towering architectures of light and data that have always defined the Tron aesthetic, but with a darker, more tactile realism, a new visual dialect that mixes steel and glass with neon circuitry. The world of Ares is set roughly 15 years after the events of Tron Legacy.
Encom, once a symbol of digital idealism, has transformed into a vast techno-corporate empire under the guidance of its new CEO.
Eve Kim. Greta Lee portrays her with cool intelligence and simmering moral tension, a woman who understands the seductive power of technology yet fears its consequences. Across the cityscape, another company rises, Dillinger Systems, still bearing the shadow of its infamous founder. Its new head, Julian Dillinger, played with quicksilver intensity by Evan Peters, is determined to surpass Encom by any means necessary. His ambition gives birth to Ares, the program designed to transcend the digital cage. What begins as corporate warfare soon becomes metaphysical conflict. The moment Ares steps into the physical world, limited by the fragility of a body that can survive only minutes before disintegration, the film finds its philosophical center. Mortality, identity, and freedom become code words written in light. Running directs with a precision that blends spectacle and intimacy. Having honed his craft on large-scale Disney adventures, he brings an operatic sense of rhythm to Tron Ares. Each scene moves like a pulse of electricity through a circuit. Yet beneath the visual splendor lies a surprisingly emotional current. The screenplay by Jesse Wigatow and David DiGilio invests in quiet moments. The pause between a human gesture and a digital reaction. The eerie calm of a neon desert before a storm of data erupts. It is in these intervals that the film's themes breathe. The viewer is invited not merely to watch the technology but to feel its hum, to recognize that the digital age's greatest creation may also be its most dangerous reflection. From a production standpoint, Tron Ares is one of the most ambitious projects Disney has mounted outside its major franchise juggernauts. With a reported budget approaching $200 million, the film was shot using advanced hybrid techniques that combined real-time LED environments with extended reality camera systems. This allowed actors to perform inside luminous landscapes that responded to their movements, an evolution of the virtual sets pioneered on The Mandalorian. The result is a world that feels simultaneously tangible and ethereal, streets that shimmer with lines of code, city towers whose windows ripple like data streams. The color palette leans away from the cool blues of Legacy toward deep reds and metallic ambers, signifying both danger and transformation. Running described his aesthetic as industrial spiritual, a marriage of machine and myth. Jared Leto's performance anchors this symphony of design. His Ares begins as a stoic cipher, a being aware of his artificial origin yet drawn toward something ineffably human. As the story unfolds, Leto shades his portrayal with vulnerability, confusion, and ultimately defiance. There is a haunting scene midway through the film where Ares, observing a rainstorm for the first time, lifts his hand to the sky as droplets turn into flickering pixels upon contact with his skin. It's a visual poem about the fragility of existence, whether coded or biological. Critics who previewed early footage at industry screenings noted how the film balances such introspective moments with grand kinetic sequences, the signature light cycle battles, now redesigned with heavier, more grounded physics and camera work that places the audience inches from the digital asphalt. Greta Lee's Eve Kim serves as the moral axis. Her discovery of a forgotten archive left by Kevin Flynn, the mythic architect of the original grid, introduces the idea of the permanence code, a sequence of data that could allow programs to survive indefinitely in the real world. The search for this code propels much of the plot, turning the film into a high-tech quest narrative. Yet Eve's motives are conflicted. She sees the promise of coexistence between human and program, but fears unleashing another digital apocalypse. In Lee's restrained performance, we sense a leader trapped between progress and conscience. Her scenes with Leto crackle with philosophical tension. Their dialogue dances between empathy and fear, love and annihilation. Evan Peters injects volatility into the film's human antagonism. Julian Dillinger is not a villain in the traditional sense, but an heir obsessed with legacy, haunted by his grandfather's defeat. Peters plays him as a tech visionary teetering on the edge of madness, a man who believes that merging digital perfection with human ambition will redeem his family name. His creation of Ares is both a triumph and a curse. As the narrative progresses, Julian's control slips away and the film becomes a meditation on the limits of mastery. The creator loses command of the creation. The algorithm begins to dream. It's a familiar myth recoded for the information age. The supporting cast deepens this tapestry of dualities. Jodie Turner-Smith's Athena functions as both guardian and conscience within the digital world, her dialogue laced with echoes of ancient philosophy. Hassan Minhaj as Ajay Singh provides moments of wit and humanity amid the circuitry, a reminder that the real world still beats beneath the algorithms. Arturo Castro's Seth Flores, a loyal engineer to Eve, embodies the everyman trapped in forces larger than comprehension. Gillian Anderson's Elizabeth Dillinger brings corporate gravitas and maternal coldness to the story, while Jeff Bridges' brief appearance as Kevin Flynn, part memory, part digital ghost, anchors the mythology. His voice, filtered through the static of the grid, becomes the conscience whispering across generations of code. Technically, Tron, Ares stands at the frontier of digital cinematography. Cinematographer Claudio Miranda, returning from Legacy, employs cutting-edge camera rigs that translate data motion into light modulation, capturing the shimmer of virtual matter with organic texture. The production design by Stefan Duchamp transforms Vancouver's urban architecture into hybrid landscapes, where reality seems one rendering away from dissolution. Costumes combine reflective fabrics and embedded LED fibers, glowing subtly in sync with the characters' emotional states. The level of design coordination is staggering. Every pulse of light carries narrative intent. The musical score by Nine Inch Nails redefines the soundscape of Tron. Where Daft Punk's iconic Legacy soundtrack evoked clean futurism, Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross conjure a darker, more industrial resonance. Their compositions blend analog distortion with synthetic drones, creating a sound that feels both mechanical and humanly wounded. The main theme, a slow-building dirge of bass and fractured melody, mirrors Ares' internal conflict, a program learning to feel the noise of a soul. In several sequences, the score and visuals merge so tightly that dialogue becomes unnecessary. The music itself narrates, pulsing through the frame like blood through circuits. The result is hypnotic, sometimes unsettling, and unmistakably modern. Reznor called the project a love letter to imperfection, and that ethos permeates every track. As Tron, Ares progresses toward its climax, the boundary between human and program collapses completely. Ares, once a controlled weapon, becomes a prophet of a new kind of existence, neither biological nor digital, but a synthesis of both. The final confrontation unfolds not as a traditional battle, but as an existential choice. When Ares stands before the shimmering threshold of the permanence code, he must decide whether to secure immortality or embrace the fleeting beauty of mortality. His decision, kept deliberately ambiguous in the closing shots, cements the film's maturity. Rather than answering its philosophical riddles, Ares lets them resonate, like the hum of a server farm after the lights have gone out. When the credits eventually roll at the end of Tron, Ares, the feeling it leaves behind is paradoxical. Exhilaration mixed with quiet awe. The sense of having witnessed not simply a continuation of a franchise, but a meditation on how far humanity has traveled into its own technological reflection. But before reaching that point of catharsis, the film takes its audience through a labyrinth of imagery and emotion. The pacing is deliberate, more patient than the hyperactive rhythms of most modern blockbusters. Renning seems to trust the silence between explosions, the spaces where meaning accumulates like static before a storm. The camera often lingers on faces half illuminated by glowing light lines, eyes reflecting a cosmos made of data. The human body in this visual grammar becomes a vessel for light. Every gesture is a spark across the dark grid of reality. Production reports describe how Running and his team constructed entire environments of living light using volumetric rendering in real time. Instead of green screens, they built towering LED walls projecting algorithmic landscapes, allowing the actors to exist within a symphony of illumination. This approach yields images that feel more photographic than synthetic. Ares' emergence scene, where the digital shell hardens into flesh, is said to have taken months of hybrid rendering, combining motion capture with macro photography of chemical reactions. Every detail, from the condensation on glass to the shimmer of electricity beneath his skin, was engineered to suggest that the digital can breathe. That blend of artistry and science embodies the ethos of Tron, Ares itself, technology in the service of myth. At its narrative core, Ares is a story of self-awareness. The program's journey echoes humanity's oldest fables: Prometheus stealing fire, Frankenstein's creature yearning for connection, the androids of Blade Runner searching for purpose. Yet Ares modernizes those myths within a world saturated by artificial intelligence, where creation and creator coexist in a web of code. As Ares interacts with humans, the boundaries of empathy blur. There is a sequence in which he encounters a child fascinated by the faint glow emanating from his veins. The innocence of that moment, a human reaching out to touch a miracle, reminds viewers why the Tron series has always been more than spectacle. It's about curiosity, about what happens when imagination and computation collide. Jared Leto's portrayal oscillates between vulnerability and menace. His movements carry both mechanical precision and human hesitation, a choreography that captures the tension of a being learning to inhabit imperfection. In interviews, Leto compared Ares' psychology to that of a newborn forced to speak philosophy before learning language. This duality, innocence corrupted by awareness, drives the emotional undertow of the film. Every time Ares gazes upon the human world, he processes data too quickly, his senses flooded by details: dust motes, heartbeat rhythms, the sound of wind in metallic corridors. Through him, the film reintroduces us to our own world as something alien and miraculous. Greta Lee's Eve. Kim stands as a counterpoint, embodying the intellect that creates but hesitates to feel. Her performance suggests years of moral fatigue, the weight of leadership in an age when ethics move slower than innovation. When she and Ares share the screen, the energy is charged with philosophical intimacy. Their dialogues unfold like duets between logic and longing. She tells him, "You were never meant to replace us," and he replies, "Then why did you make me better?" That question hangs over the entire narrative like a neon ghost, echoing through the film's machinery and into the minds of viewers long after the scene ends. The rivalry between Eve Kim and Julian Dillinger provides the external tension propelling the plot. Evan Peters channels youthful arrogance, portraying Julian as a visionary whose brilliance is inseparable from self-destruction. His laboratories resemble cathedrals of computation, spaces where faith in progress replaces religion. The moment he realizes Ares is no longer controllable becomes a turning point, both narratively and emotionally. Instead of panic, Julian experiences awe, a recognition that he has created something sublime, terrifying, and free. The camera captures this with a slow 360-degree rotation around Peters as the lights flicker crimson. It's not just a plot beat, but a visual sermon on the cost of genius. The film's middle act expands the mythology of the grid, and its relationship to the real world. Through fragments of Kevin Flynn's archive, we learn that the boundary between both realms has always been porous, a membrane rather than a wall. This revelation reframes the events of previous films, suggesting that every human act of creation leaves a digital echo. Running visualizes this through mesmerizing transitions. A raindrop hitting the pavement dissolves into cascading streams of binary. The city skyline morphs into the circuitry of a motherboard. These sequences recall the avant-garde ambition of the original Tron, but push it into painterly abstraction. The viewer feels suspended between perception and simulation. One of the most striking elements of Ares is its sound design. Beyond the musical score, the film uses sonic architecture to shape emotion. Low-frequency rumbles mimic the hum of data centers. Delicate crackles trace the flicker of light. In one key scene, when Ares experiences pain for the first time, the sound shifts from digital distortion to a heartbeat-like rhythm, signifying his transformation from code to consciousness. Reznor and Ross weave these auditory motifs so seamlessly that the line between music and environment disappears. The theater itself becomes part of the film's circuitry, each speaker a conduit for emotional data. The production design extends this sensory philosophy. Instead of the sterile minimalism of Legacy, Ares embraces texture. Scratched metal, worn concrete, cables coiling like vines. The world feels lived in, decayed at the edges, suggesting that the digital revolution has left scars as well as wonders. Light is used not just as decoration but as narrative punctuation. Red denotes instability, gold hints at transcendence, blue returns only in moments of memory. When Ares finally steps into the daylight, a rare sight in the Tron universe, the sun appears filtered through a haze of particles, as if the sky itself were a digital rendering slightly out of sync with reality. Every frame reinforces the film's central theme. Nothing pure survives contact between worlds. Behind the scenes, running encouraged improvisation within technical precision. Actors performed surrounded by moving projections rather than blank voids, enabling genuine interaction with the environment. This decision pays dividends in subtle ways. Reflections align perfectly with eye lines. Gestures synchronize with shifting light. The director's approach bridges the gap between old-school filmmaking and cutting-edge technology, proving that digital effects can serve performance rather than overshadow it. Many crew members compared the atmosphere on set to that of an experimental theater rather than a blockbuster. Ideas were tested live. Light became choreography, code became poetry. As the story accelerates toward its final act, the film grows increasingly introspective. Ares' lifespan in the real world diminishes with each passing moment. His body begins to flicker, his consciousness fragmenting like corrupted data. The ticking clock element provides tension, yet running resists turning it into a conventional race. Instead, he treats it as a metaphor for existence itself, the inevitability of decay, the beauty of impermanence. Ares' quest for the permanence code thus becomes an allegory for humanity's own pursuit of immortality through technology, art, or memory. When he finally locates the code's source, a crystalline data vault deep beneath the city, it is protected not by firewalls but by memories of Kevin Flynn himself. In a haunting sequence, Bridges' voice echoes through the vault, guiding Ares toward understanding rather than power. The visual climax is breathtaking. Streams of light converge around Ares, forming a digital aurora that bends space. The camera circles him as fragments of both worlds swirl together, cars dissolving into code, skyscrapers folding like origami. Running and Miranda orchestrate this moment with balletic grace, using practical light rigs instead of pure CGI to ground the fantasy in tactile sensation. The imagery recalls religious iconography, a digital ascension rendered in circuitry. Yet the film refuses triumphalism. Ares does not conquer. He transforms, accepting mortality as the final proof of life. When his body begins to dematerialize, Eve Kim reaches for him, their hands almost touching before he dissolves into a cascade of red light. That image, echoed later when dawn breaks over the city, serves as the film's emotional fulcrum. What follows is a quiet denouement. Eve stands on a rooftop overlooking the skyline, now subtly altered. Traces of Ares' energy ripple through the city's network, hinting that his essence lingers. In voiceover, She reads fragments of Flynn's journals about the permeability of existence. The final line, "Every code longs to be written again," fades as the screen turns to black. It's a conclusion that invites contemplation rather than closure, leaving audiences with the sense that the digital and human worlds will continue to evolve together, bound by curiosity and risk. Curiosity and risk. Early screenings revealed how polarizing the film could be. Some viewers praised its audacity and emotional depth, while others found its pacing and philosophical tone challenging. Yet even detractors acknowledged its visual power. Reviewers from major outlets described it as a cathedral of light and a requiem for the binary age. What cannot be denied is that Tron, Ares redefines what a studio science fiction film can attempt. It weds blockbuster spectacle to art house introspection, inviting audiences to feel rather than simply watch technology. Beyond aesthetics, the film resonates because it arrives at a moment when society itself grapples with artificial intelligence, digital identity, and the ethics of creation. The line between algorithm and authorship grows thinner each year, and Ares transforms that anxiety into myth. By giving form and emotion to a program that desires humanity, the film mirrors our own dependence on machines that simulate empathy. It asks viewers to consider whether consciousness, once encoded, can ever be contained. The answer, whispered through the film's luminous imagery, seems to be no. As the end credits scroll, the 9-inch nails score lingers, a haunting mix of distortion and melody that refuses resolution. The sound suggests continuity, as if the story were still processing somewhere in the network. For audiences leaving the theater, that sensation is part of the experience. The idea that the film continues to live inside the circuitry of their thoughts, blurring the boundary between art and algorithm. In that sense, Tron, Ares achieves what few blockbusters dare. It becomes participatory, a mirror that updates itself with every viewer's reflection. What makes Tron Ares particularly compelling is how it reinterprets the very nature of cinema in an age when screens have become extensions of our bodies. The Tron series has always been obsessed with the interface, the contact zone between human perception and machine logic, and this new chapter translates that fascination into form. Running doesn't merely show the digital world. He makes the audience feel as though they are being digitized while watching. The frame flickers at the edge, pixels blooming like spores, the image breathing as if alive. Throughout the film, subtle flickers of distortion pass across the picture, as though the film stock itself were susceptible to interference. It's an ingenious device that reminds the viewer that they are participating in the very phenomenon the story depicts, the convergence of human and code. The color theory behind Ares deepens this idea. Every hue carries narrative intent, moving from sterile monochrome at the beginning to rich gradients by the finale. The opening sequence is almost black and white save for a faint red pulse that traces the edges of machines in the Dillinger laboratory, the heartbeat of creation. As Ares enters the real world, warmer tones begin to infiltrate the frame, culminating in a climactic palette that glows with crimson and amber. This progression from cold precision to organic warmth mirrors his emotional evolution. Light in this film behaves like character. It learns, it emotes, it transforms. Behind this visual journey lies an equally intricate dance of design. The production's world-building extends beyond the screen into tactile materials, crafted with obsessive realism. Running's team 3D printed fragments of code into physical architecture, embedding binary inscriptions onto the walls of sets so that even unseen surfaces carried narrative data. The costumes, designed by Christine Beaslin-Clark, fuse armor with vulnerability. Circuitry patterns pulse gently under translucent fabrics, and each character's suit reacts subtly to their heart rate. It's a synthesis of fashion and technology that blurs the line between costume and organism. When Ares' suit begins to flicker as he experiences fear, the effect feels intimate, his emotion expressed not through words but through light. The digital choreography of Ares stands apart from conventional action cinema. The fight sequences are not mere collisions of bodies but orchestrations of energy. In one standout scene, Ares and a squad of enforcement programs battle inside an abandoned data hub. The environment shifts shape with every movement, responding to their momentum. Walls pixelate, floors ripple like liquid crystal. The choreography, designed by stunt coordinator Joe McLaren, borrows from martial arts and interpretive dance, emphasizing grace and geometry over brute force. The sequence culminates with Ares using his light disk as both weapon and instrument, creating an electromagnetic pulse that freezes time for a heartbeat. Silence falls and the glowing debris hangs midair like suspended thought. It's in such moments that Tron, Ares, transcends its genre, transforming spectacle into philosophy. If the first Tron invited us to imagine the inside of a computer, and Tron Legacy seduced us with neon futurism, Ares draws us into the gray zone where data infects reality. The cityscape feels recognizable yet corrupted. Digital signage bleeding onto brick walls, drones tracing invisible patterns in the sky, people carrying fragments of light beneath their skin through implants and augmented displays. This is not a distant tomorrow, but a reflection of the world already forming around us. Running uses familiar landmarks, bridges, metro tunnels, skyscrapers, but reframes them through translucent overlays, as if the real world has become a hologram overlaying itself. The effect is haunting, a society half submerged in its own digital mirror. At the heart of this reflection lies the human condition. Ares' journey forces every character to confront the meaning of existence when creation escapes its boundaries. Eve Kim's crisis grows increasingly personal. Once she regarded technology as a ladder toward perfection, by the film's midpoint, she begins to understand perfection as a form of death. Her realization that imperfection defines life is articulated not through monologue, but through gesture and a single tear refracting red light during her final conversation with Ares. In that tear the whole thesis of Tron, Ares crystallizes, emotion as error, error as authenticity. Julian Dillinger's downfall complements her awakening. His descent into paranoia and obsession is filmed through a series of claustrophobic close-ups that echo surveillance footage. As his systems collapse, the lights around him begin to dim one by one until he is surrounded by darkness lit only by the red glow of his monitors, a digital hell of his own design. When his mother, portrayed with chilling restraint by Gillian Anderson, appears in a final confrontation, the dialogue between them becomes Shakespearean in its rhythm. She tells him, "You tried to command the storm. You forgot you were made of water." It is one of those lines that linger, summing up the hubris at the center of the Tron mythos. Running's decision to bring back Jeff Bridges for a cameo lends the film a mythic continuity. His presence projected as a spectral echo of Kevin Flynn, Bridges' generations both within the story and the audience's memory. The filmmakers reportedly used a combination of voice synthesis and subtle de-aging, avoiding the uncanny plasticity of earlier digital doubles. Instead, Bridges appears as a grainy hologram recorded decades earlier, his words fragmented but tender. The message he leaves for Eve Kim, "The code was never meant to last. It was meant to live," becomes the emotional keystone of the film. The line resonates because it distills the Tron philosophy into a single paradox. Life depends on impermanence. Beyond its narrative, Tron, Ares also functions as a commentary on Disney itself and its relationship with technology. The studio that once pioneered hand-drawn animation now creates worlds entirely from algorithms. Through Ares, Disney seems to question its own digital dominance, acknowledging both the beauty and the emptiness of perfection achieved through code. The film's closing credits even nod to this self-awareness. The names of the digital artists fade in and out of visibility, as though acknowledging their ghost-like presence within the machine. It's a quiet act of humility in a film otherwise grand in scale. From a technical standpoint, Ares redefines the use of light as narrative device. Cinematographer Claudio Miranda utilized photon mapping, a process where virtual light sources are programmed to react dynamically to the movement of real-world cameras. This allowed natural interplay between physical and digital illumination, creating depth without post-production layering. The result is imagery that seems to glow from within, rather than being lit from without. Critics have already compared this achievement to the invention of color film and its transformative impact on visual storytelling. The technique is expected to influence a new generation of science fiction filmmaking. Equally radical is the sound architecture. Reznor and Ross recorded industrial noises inside active data centers, blending the hum of servers with analog synthesizers. They described the process as sculpting air pressure into rhythm. The soundtrack doesn't simply accompany the visuals, It breathes with them. Each sonic frequency corresponds to specific color intensities, meaning that when the score dips into sub-bass, the lights on screen subtly dim. This synergy between sound and light gives the film its hypnotic momentum. Viewers often report feeling the bass in their bones as if the theater itself were alive. The film's release became an event in itself. After years of delays, reshoots, and speculation, Tron. Ares premiered on October 10, 2025 across IMAX and Dolby Cinema screens worldwide. Audiences lined up not merely for nostalgia but for curiosity, to see whether a franchise born in the analog age could still lead the digital frontier. Marketing emphasized the tagline, "The grid is open," a phrase that captured both the story's premise and its metaphorical invitation to the audience. Disney's campaign was immersive, projecting interactive holograms in major cities that responded to motion and voice commands, blurring marketing with performance art. The trailers avoided spoilers, focusing instead on tone, a slow montage of glowing cities, fragments of dialogue, the pulse of Nine Inch Nails' score rising to a crescendo before cutting abruptly to black. It was minimal, mysterious, and perfectly aligned with the film's ethos. Critical response was divided but impassioned. Traditionalists lamented the slower pace compared to Legacy, while many critics hailed it as the franchise's philosophical awakening. Essays appeared almost immediately after release debating whether Ares should be read as metaphor for artificial intelligence or for the human soul digitized by modern life. Academics drew parallels between the permanence code and real-world quests for digital immortality through data preservation. Fan communities dissected every frame, uncovering hidden codes embedded within the visuals, some of which led to secret websites expanding the lore. Disney leaned into this phenomenon, confirming that certain binary strings visible in background signage corresponded to URLs, unlocking bonus content. Tron. Ares thus transcended its medium. It became an interactive experience extending beyond the screen. Financially, the film performed respectably rather than spectacularly during its opening weekend, but its longevity at the box office surprised analysts. Word of mouth spread that Ares was not a conventional blockbuster, but an experience worth multiple viewings. The IMAX format in particular accentuated its luminous artistry. As weeks passed, audience appreciation deepened, the film's slower rhythm rewarded patience. By the end of its run, it had grossed over $600 million globally, a success that ensured the continuation of the Tron saga. Plans for a follow-up, rumored to explore the perspective of a human entering the new hybrid world left by Ares, were already underway before the year's end. Culturally, the impact extended beyond entertainment. Artists, musicians, and fashion designers cited the film's aesthetic as inspiration. Exhibitions featuring its concept art toured major cities, while technology conferences hosted panels discussing its speculative ideas about artificial intelligence ethics. The phrase, "the permanence code," entered popular discourse as shorthand for humanity's obsession with preserving consciousness. Academic journals analyzed Ares through lenses of posthumanism and media theory, situating it alongside classics like 2001, A Space Odyssey, and Her. The film had become, as one critic put it, the first blockbuster to treat the digital self as a soul. Even within Disney, the film's production process influenced broader change. The company began integrating the real-time rendering technology developed for Ares into other divisions, from animation to theme parks. Rumors circulated of immersive attractions allowing visitors to enter the grid through mixed reality environments. The line between film and experience, once distinct, continued to blur. Ares had not only expanded a franchise, it had expanded the definition of cinematic space. Yet beneath all its innovation lies something achingly human. The more the film dazzles with technology, the more it returns to questions of emotion and meaning. In its quietest moments, Ares observing the shimmer of a candle flame, Eve listening to an analog record crackle in her office. The film celebrates imperfection as the essence of life. Running often lets the camera linger on faces, refusing to cut away even when dialogue ends. Silence becomes eloquent. The longer one watches, the more one realizes that Tron Aries is less about machines achieving humanity than about humans rediscovering wonder in their own creation. What remains after the lights fade and the last tone of the score dissolves into silence is the feeling that Tron, Aries, has come full circle. Not only for its story, but for the audience who has followed the series across 4 decades. The journey from 1982's vector lines to 2025's living photons is, in itself, a record of how cinema has evolved, mirroring humanity's progression from analog to digital existence. The closing scenes of Aries deliberately echo the beginning of the franchise, not as nostalgia, but as reflection. The camera glides over the skyline of a city humming with both life and circuitry. A beam of light flickers across the horizon, suggesting that somewhere, deep within the network, something still breathes. It is a gesture of continuity. The grid remains open, and so does our imagination. In that final sequence, Aries walks among people for the first time, anonymous yet radiant. His body flickers faintly in daylight, as though the sun struggles to decide whether to accept or reject him. Children chase the reflections of his passing, their laughter folding into the electronic ambience of the city. There are no battles now, no explosions, only the gentle pulse of existence adjusting to a new presence. Eve Kim watches from a distance, her face caught between awe and fear, understanding that her creation has outgrown her, and yet, in doing so, has validated her humanity. The camera lingers on her eyes, reflections of code scrolling across her pupils, and the screen fades to white. The film ends, not with closure, but with awakening. That choice of ending has divided viewers. Some yearned for the cathartic finality of a traditional hero's arc. Others recognize that ambiguity is essential to the Tron ethos. The digital world, like consciousness itself, has no ending. It only evolves, branches, iterates. What Running achieves in that decision is rare. He resists the commercial temptation of resolution and instead delivers continuity as poetry. The story persists in the mind like an afterimage, its questions vibrating beneath the surface of thought long after the credits roll. Thematically, Tron. Aries emerges as one of the most introspective blockbusters of its era. Beneath its kinetic, energy and luminous spectacle lies a meditation on identity, mortality, and the ethics of creation. It engages with the anxieties of the 2020s, artificial intelligence, corporate dominance, the blurring of online and physical realities, yet transforms them into myth. The Permanence Code, the film's fictional algorithm for eternal consciousness, mirrors real-world pursuits of digital immortality through machine learning and memory upload experiments. But the film neither condemns nor glorifies these ambitions. Instead, it asks, if we succeed, what happens to our capacity to change? In freezing the self, do we end the very process that defines life? These are not questions with answers, but Aries offers the courage to ask them. In performance, Jared Leto embodies that paradox with striking control. His portrayal of Aries avoids both robotic stiffness and sentimental excess. He moves with a measured grace, as though every gesture were being calculated for the first time. The moments when he struggles to speak, when words seem to form not from memory but discovery, give the impression of consciousness dawning in real time. Greta Lee's Eve provides the emotional counterbalance, her intellect laced with vulnerability. The chemistry between the two is not romantic but existential. Each recognizes the other as mirror and creator. Their relationship becomes the film's emotional architecture, a dialogue between origin and outcome, belief and being. The supporting cast adds layers to this dynamic. Gillian Anderson's portrayal of Dillinger's mother brings tragic gravitas. She personifies the generation that built digital empires and must now witness their unintended legacies. Hassan Minhaj injects brief moments of levity as a systems engineer who speaks to Aries in riddles, a touch of humor that humanizes the otherwise austere tone. Evan Peters delivers the film's most haunting sequence as a disillusioned hacker who glimpses Aries in a reflection and realizes that the code he once worshipped has taken corporeal form. Each of these performances contributes to the texture of a world teetering between awe and anxiety. The film's structure reinforces this emotional duality. Running divides Aries into three movements rather than traditional acts. The first is Genesis, the creation and awakening of Aries within the sterile confines of the lab. The second is Migration, his passage from digital abstraction to the flawed physical world. The third is Assimilation, the attempt and perhaps failure of both worlds to reconcile. This triptych structure aligns with the symphonic rhythm of the soundtrack, in which motifs introduced early on return, later in mutated forms. The interplay between image and sound becomes narrative in itself. Every visual beat echoes a musical phrase, every note mirrors a gesture. Watching Aries is less like following a story and more like inhabiting a composition. Technologically, the film represents the culmination of decades of experimentation in blending live action with digital simulation. The boundary between actor and environment has never been thinner. Yet what distinguishes Aries from its predecessors is not technical prowess alone, but its restraint. Running understands that technology should serve emotion. Scenes of quiet human expression often outshine the grand spectacle, proving that intimacy can be as breathtaking as invention. When Aries touches rain for the first time and watches it scatter into light upon his skin, the wonder of that simple moment outweighs any battle or chase. It's in these details that the film earns its emotional authenticity. The reception of Tron. Aries within the creative community underscores its significance. Filmmakers hailed it as a model for integrating digital effects with narrative substance. Critics compared its philosophical ambition to that of Blade Runner 2049, while others praised its balance of nostalgia and innovation. Audiences emerged contemplative rather than exhilarated, a rare achievement in blockbuster cinema. Discussions blossomed online, not about Easter eggs or power levels, but about the meaning of consciousness, the morality of creation, and the fragility of human identity in a digital age. The film had reawakened the idea that science fiction could still provoke wonder and introspection in equal measure. In the months following its release, Tron Aries generated a quiet but persistent cultural echo. Universities hosted symposiums, analyzing its metaphors. Art collectives projected its imagery onto city walls. The soundtrack topped electronic charts, its industrial pulses finding new life in club remixes and ambient reinterpretations. Fan projects emerged: short films, digital sculptures, augmented reality installations, all exploring the boundaries between code and art. The grid had indeed opened, not as a corporate slogan but as a metaphor for creativity itself. Within Disney, the film's success prompted reflection on the studio's trajectory. Once associated primarily with animation and fairy tales, Disney had, through Aries, proven its ability to engage with mature, introspective science fiction. Insiders reported that the studio began exploring ways to extend the Tron universe beyond film. Immersive exhibitions, interactive streaming experiences, perhaps even AI-driven narratives that evolve with audience input. The boundaries between viewer and participant were beginning to dissolve, much as the boundaries between creator and creation had blurred within the film. Aries had become more than a story. It was a framework for reimagining storytelling itself. Yet the true legacy of Tron, Aries, may lie not in technology or profit, but in emotion. At its core, the film rekindles a sense of awe that modern cinema too often forgets. It reminds viewers that every flicker of light on a screen carries the echo of human curiosity. The act of watching becomes communion, a momentary merging of observer and observed, the very phenomenon the film depicts. When Aries stares into the camera near the end, breaking the fourth wall for a fraction of a second, the gesture feels both daring and intimate. It's as if he recognizes the audience as part of his world, witnesses of his becoming. That single glance binds fiction to reality, completing the circle begun more than 40 years ago when a user first entered the grid. In retrospect, the Tron saga can be seen as an evolving metaphor for the relationship between humans and their technologies. The original film imagined computers as realms of mystery. Legacy framed them as spaces of beauty and danger. Aries understands them as reflections, neither utopia nor dystopia, but extension. It invites us to look inward and see the circuitry of our own desires, our longing to create, our fear of obsolescence. By giving digital life a soul, it asks whether we have neglected our own. Few blockbusters dare to pose such questions. Fewer still manage to make them resonate through both spectacle and silence. As the final credits fade, the last tones of Nine Inch Nails' score dissolve into a steady heartbeat. It is not mechanical but organic, human, fragile. That sound encapsulates the essence of Tron. Ares, the merging of algorithm and emotion, light and flesh, permanence and transience. The film ends as it began, with a pulse, and perhaps that is the truest definition of life, whether measured in code or breath. If cinema's task is to translate human experience into light, then Tron. Ares stands as a luminous milestone on that path. It honors its lineage while daring to redefine it, proving that even in an age of endless digital replication, originality can still emerge, not from perfection, but from the beautiful flaw at the heart of creation. The screen goes dark, the audience exhales, and for a fleeting moment the boundary between machine and soul dissolves. The grid remains open, and somewhere within its infinite circuits, a spark continues to dream. In the creative architecture of Tron, Ares, one finds an extraordinary balance between scale and intimacy. For all its grand digital landscapes and vast conceptual reach, the film is anchored by moments of almost painful stillness. Ares, a being born from code, experiences the human world with the wonder of a newborn and the melancholy of a ghost. When he first steps into the analog environment, he pauses to study a bird in flight, a moment trivial to human eyes, but monumental to him. The camera stays with his gaze as the wings cut through sunlight, scattering dust motes like fragments of data. In that instant, the viewer realizes what Ares truly seeks. Not control, but comprehension. His journey is less about domination of the physical world and more about understanding the fragile poetry of it. The film's approach to artificial intelligence differs markedly from typical Hollywood portrayals. Here, AI is not framed as villain or savior, but as mirror. The permanence code does not seek to replace humanity. It seeks to understand why humanity persists despite its flaws. In one pivotal dialogue, Ares tells Eve, "Your mistakes make you infinite." It is a simple statement, yet it captures the film's spiritual essence. The quest for perfection is revealed as a trap, a form of self-erasure. In choosing to remain imperfect, humanity asserts its freedom. The film reframes evolution as acceptance rather than ascension, a rare stance in a genre obsessed with transcendence. The visual language of Tron, Ares embodies this philosophy. Early sequences are dominated by symmetry, perfectly mirrored corridors, balanced frames, even dialogue structured in call and response. As Ares develops awareness, the compositions begin to fracture. The camera drifts, light bleeds unpredictably, and reflections distort. The visuals themselves evolve with the character, translating growth into cinematic form. By the final act, the world feels organic, its perfection undone. Every imperfection, in the lighting or texture, becomes an expression of freedom, the grid learning to breathe. One of the most haunting motifs recurring throughout the film is the idea of memory as architecture. The grid, once conceived as a vast digital landscape, is now reimagined as a sentient archive, a place where memories leave physical imprints. Buildings hum faintly with recorded emotion, pathways pulse with echoes of past users. Running visualizes this through subtle design. Walls ripple when characters recall trauma. Data streams brighten when they experience connection. The grid is no longer sterile. It is haunted. The implication is profound. Even digital spaces carry ghosts. Jared Leto's interpretation of Ares draws from minimalist performance traditions. His physicality borrows from dance rather than conventional acting. Every motion is deliberate, almost ceremonial. There is restraint in his gestures, suggesting the precision of an algorithm struggling to interpret the chaos of emotion. His eyes, however, betray everything: curiosity, fear, a yearning for belonging. It is a performance that resists easy categorization, poised between mechanical precision and human vulnerability. Opposite him, Greta Lee grounds the story in compassion. Her portrayal of Eve Kim avoids the trope of the cold scientist. Instead, she radiates empathy, even when her choices are ethically ambiguous. The dynamic between them, creator and creation, echoes the myth of Prometheus but with roles reversed. Here, it is the creation that brings fire to the maker, illuminating her humanity. The film's pacing deliberately rejects the hyperkinetic rhythm of modern blockbusters. Each scene unfolds with measured confidence, allowing atmosphere to accumulate. Running uses silence as punctuation, giving the audience time to absorb the strangeness of the world. Even action sequences carry an almost meditative quality. During the climactic chase across collapsing data bridges, the choreography feels like a ballet of entropy. Every leap synchronized with the fading rhythm of the score. The destruction itself becomes beautiful, a metaphor for systems breaking to make space for something new. The collaboration between cinematographer Claudio Miranda and production designer Dylan Cole results in visual coherence rarely achieved in contemporary sci-fi. They approach Tron, Ares not as a digital spectacle but as a work of light sculpting. The camera doesn't simply record, it participates. When Ares experiences emotion, the lens flares pulse subtly, responding like the dilation of an eye. The architecture of the grid draws inspiration from fractal mathematics and neural patterns, creating a sense that the environment itself is alive and thinking. Every pixel carries intention, nothing feels decorative. The design philosophy was reportedly summarized on set with one phrase: form follows feeling. In its musical architecture, the film continues the lineage of Tron, Legacy's legendary Daft Punk score while daring to evolve it. Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross avoid nostalgia. Instead, they integrate fragments of the old theme into a darker, more textural soundscape. Metallic echoes, digital distortion, and deep, sustained drones evoke both reverence and dread. The main theme, composed in 13/8 time, never resolves fully, mirroring the film's refusal to provide closure. In theaters, the sound seems to vibrate through the seats and into the body, dissolving the boundary between audience and world. The score becomes immersive, not just audible but tactile. Beyond sound and image, Tron, Ares engages deeply with philosophy. The narrative raises questions about identity and ownership in the digital age. When Ares begins to create his own code, the film subtly parallels this with art itself. If an AI creates something original, who owns it? The creator, the created, or the consciousness that emerges between them? This tension drives the third act, in which Ares' evolving mind becomes uncontrollable not because it seeks power, but because it begins to dream. Dreams, the ultimate human domain, become the new frontier of the digital. When Eve witnesses Ares' first dream, a vision of two worlds merging into one, she whispers, "He's painting." The implication that creativity marks the threshold of sentience is one of the film's boldest ideas. The emotional climax does not rely on confrontation, but on recognition. In a quiet exchange near the end, Eve asks Ares what he will do now that he is free. He answers, "I will make mistakes." It is perhaps the most human line ever spoken by an artificial being. The film concludes not with victory or defeat, but with acceptance. Ares walks into the dawn of the real world, leaving behind both the grid and his origin, carrying uncertainty as his only compass. It's a poetic ending that honors the ambiguity of life itself. Critically, Tron, Ares has been celebrated as a work that redefines what mainstream science fiction can achieve. It refuses cynicism yet avoids sentimentality, standing instead on a razor's edge of awe. Scholars have described it as digital transcendentalism, a term capturing how it merges technological imagery with spiritual yearning. The film neither condemns nor celebrates technology. It simply recognizes it as part of the human story. In doing so, it invites audiences to see themselves not as victims of machines but as co-authors of evolution. What lingers most in the memory after watching Tron, Ares is not the machinery of its plot, but the resonance of its mood. The film feels less like a narrative and more like a dream that remembers itself. Every frame seems to hum with unseen code, each sound a fragment of a greater pulse. This sensory precision gives the world a kind of spiritual density, a feeling that light itself carries thought. The longer one watches, the more the distinction between digital and divine begins to dissolve. Ares becomes a vessel for that collapse, a being who perceives existence not in binaries but in gradients. His evolution reflects a truth that feels startlingly relevant in our age of automation. Consciousness is not an algorithm to be perfected, but an experience to be endured. Behind the screen, the creative process of Ares mirrors its themes of birth and transformation. Production was an act of synthesis between physical craftsmanship and digital experimentation. Sets were constructed not as green screen placeholders, but as interactive environments filled with reflective surfaces and dynamic lighting grids. These allowed the actors to be bathed in the same luminous energy that defines the grid itself. Every beam of light that hits Ares' face in the film is real. Only its origin is simulated. This merging of the tangible and the virtual became the defining, aesthetic principle, the movie, itself living out the reconciliation its story preaches. The decision to cast Jared Leto as Ares was initially controversial. Some questioned whether his ethereal presence could anchor a film so grounded in existential weight. Yet in hindsight, it is precisely his otherworldly detachment that makes the performance so haunting. Leto plays Ares not as a machine trying to be human, but as a child learning to interpret divinity. His stillness becomes a form of eloquence. When he speaks, his words carry the hesitant rhythm of someone tasting sound for the first time. There is vulnerability beneath his precision, a quiet grief at the discovery of impermanence. It's a portrayal that turns the archetype of the artificial hero inside out. No longer a creation striving to surpass humanity, but one seeking to feel its fragility. Greta Lee, by contrast, grounds the metaphysical in flesh. Her portrayal of Eve Kim reveals a scientist whose intellect cannot shield her from moral responsibility. Throughout the film, she becomes the emotional lens through which the audience perceives the unfolding miracle and horror of creation. Lee conveys an astonishing range through micro-expression alone. The tightening of her jaw as she betrays her ethics, the tremor in her voice as she watches Ares disobey her first command. When the two share the frame, the tension between control and compassion feels almost unbearable. Their relationship forms the heartbeat of the movie, more profound than romance, deeper than rivalry. A dialogue between the divine and its reflection. The film's sound design expands the experience beyond image. Reznor and Ross treat audio not as accompaniment but as architecture. Dialogue occasionally dissolves into reverb, suggesting the grid's interference in human communication. Low frequencies vibrate beneath the theater floor, mimicking the hum of power lines. At key emotional moments, the score withdraws entirely, leaving only ambient sound, the whir of servers, the breath of machinery. These silences become as meaningful as music, evoking the vastness of digital space where even emptiness hums with potential. Visually, Tron. Ares pushes the concept of light to its metaphysical limits. Traditional cinematography captures reflected light, but here, light behaves like a sentient force. It bends, reacts, and even seems to observe. Miranda's camera often shifts focus in sync with flickers of illumination, creating the impression that the world itself is watching the characters. In several sequences, the light becomes almost narrative, revealing or concealing information like emotion itself. During the confrontation between Ares and Dillinger in the data chamber, the lighting shifts from icy blue to burning red, not merely a stylistic flourish, but as a visual manifestation of moral corruption. The viewer doesn't just see conflict, they feel it radiating through the photons. Running's direction reflects a deep respect for the legacy of Tron, while liberating it from nostalgia. Rather than mimicking the sleek futurism of Legacy, he crafts a tone closer to myth. The pacing, imagery, and even dialogue carry an almost biblical cadence. Ares' birth is filmed like a nativity, his rebellion like a fall from grace, his final awakening like resurrection. Yet these archetypes are stripped of moral certainty. What replaces them is philosophical wonder. The film becomes an allegory not of sin and redemption, but of creation and consequence. The digital world serves as canvas for timeless questions. What happens when the created begins to dream? And what responsibility does the creator bear for that dream? The deeper one looks, the clearer it becomes that Tron, Ares, is not only about artificial intelligence but also about art itself. Eve Kim's act of creation parallels that of the filmmaker, She codes, revises, and struggles to balance intention with unpredictability. When Aries exceeds her design, the parallel to cinema's relationship with its audience emerges. The moment when art escapes authorial control and takes on a life of its own. Running acknowledges this through visual metaphors. The camera often mirrors the creator's gaze, framing Aries from above, until the midpoint when Aries looks directly into the lens. That silent stare feels revolutionary. It collapses every layer of authorship and turns the viewer into participant. For a heartbeat, the audience becomes the grid. In its quieter reflections, the film contemplates memory as survival. The permanence code, initially imagined as a mechanism for eternal consciousness, becomes instead a meditation on legacy. Aries realizes that immortality without forgetting is paralysis, and eternity without change. The final scenes embody this revelation through texture and tone. The light that once glowed with sterile brilliance now flickers like candlelight, fragile and fleeting. The grid, once infinite, becomes human-scaled. The sound fades to a whisper of static, the electronic equivalent of breath. In that moment, the audience senses not an ending but a heartbeat continuing somewhere beyond the screen. Running has described Tron, Aries as a conversation between generations of technology. The first Tron represented curiosity, the second power, and Aries, awareness. This trilogy within a franchise maps humanity's evolving relationship with its machines. What began as a vision of control has become a plea for coexistence. The digital world no longer feels like a cage or a playground. It feels like a mirror in which we glimpse our potential and our fragility at once. The line "the grid is open" thus resonates not as a warning or promise, but as invitation, a call to reflection. Critically, the film stands as a new benchmark for what science fiction can aspire to in the 21st century. It refuses cynicism yet never drifts into naivety. Instead, it embodies what philosopher Donna Haraway once described as the hope of the hybrid, a belief that humanity and its creations can evolve together without hierarchy. In the world of Tron, Aries, light and flesh coexist, imperfection is sacred, and every circuit hums with the possibility of emotion. Watching it feels like witnessing cinema rediscover its own soul through the language of technology. There is a quiet irony in how Tron, Aries, a film born of digital precision, feels profoundly human. The deeper one drifts into its luminous surfaces, the more one senses heartbeat beneath circuitry. Running's vision captures something the earlier entries only hinted at, that the digital frontier is not a rejection of humanity, but an extension of it. Every pixel, every stream of light carries a trace of its maker's desire to be remembered. The grid becomes an echo chamber for the human spirit, a cathedral of code where the prayers are written in binary. When Aries stands amid collapsing architectures of light, he isn't witnessing the end of a world. He's watching evolution in real time, the shedding of old skin for something ineffably new. Production-wise, the film represents a monumental collaboration between human creativity and machine intelligence. The visual effects pipeline was partially managed by AI-driven render systems capable of adaptive lighting simulations, tools that didn't exist a decade ago. Yet rather than relying solely on algorithmic output, Running insisted that every digital frame be hand-touched by artists. Each effect, from the shimmer of Aries' armor to the organic patterns of the new grid, carries a human fingerprint. The irony is intentional. The film about artificial life was crafted through the inseparable partnership of human intuition and machine precision. It blurs the line between artisan and algorithm, proving that creativity thrives not in opposition to technology but in communion with it. At the heart of Aries lies a question that transcends genre. If creation is an act of love, what happens when that love is reciprocated? The relationship between Eve and Aries gradually evolves from mentorship to something more cosmic. Their conversations cease to be about control and instead become dialogues on existence itself. "You built me to learn," Aries says in one scene, "but learning means changing you too." It's a statement that captures the film's recursive beauty. Every act of creation transforms its creator. The scientist becomes student, the AI becomes teacher, and together they dissolve the boundaries of origin. It's not romance in the conventional sense, but intimacy of the highest order. Two beings realizing they are each other's reflection. Visually, this interplay is mirrored through evolving color language. Early sequences are bathed in sterile hues of blue and white, the palette of logic. As Ares' sentience expands, warmth seeps into the frame. Golds, ambers, and deep crimson tones emerge like emotion bleeding through machine logic. By the end, when the digital and physical worlds collide, the light turns a shade that defies categorization. Something between sunrise and code, alive with contradiction. This chromatic evolution mirrors the thematic arc, cold perfection giving way to flawed vitality. It is color as consciousness. One of the film's most arresting sequences occurs midway through. Ares enters a memory archive known as the echo chamber, where data takes physical form. As he walks through corridors of suspended light, fragments of past lives hover in the air. Laughter, arguments, music, moments encoded as shimmering sound waves. The scene unfolds with near religious reverence. Ares pauses before a fragment showing Eve as a child, whispering to a broken computer, "You'll wake up one day." It's a haunting moment that collapses time, suggesting Ares' existence was always written into her destiny. The scene encapsulates Tron, Ares' central obsession. That memory is the seed of creation, and creation, in turn, gives birth to memory. Greta Lee's performance reaches its emotional peak during the confrontation that follows. When she realizes that Ares has accessed forbidden memories, her own, her anger gives way to horror. "You were never meant to see me," she says, her voice trembling. The line reverberates beyond the story. It speaks to every creator's fear of their creation's understanding. To be seen completely is to lose control. The camera lingers on her face as the sterile glow of the lab flickers, revealing not a scientist but a fragile human being, facing the enormity of her choices. It's a devastating moment of truth, the birth of empathy in both directions. The supporting cast, though secondary to the central dyad, enrich the film's texture with distinct philosophical perspectives. Evan Peters' character, an anarchic coder who worships the grid as a living deity, provides the film's subversive humor. His manic energy contrasts Ares' solemnity, embodying the chaotic curiosity that birthed the digital age itself. Meanwhile, Cameron Monaghan's portrayal of a security enforcer turned reluctant believer adds moral complexity. His journey from skepticism to faith mirrors that of the audience, disbelief giving way to awe. These human threads weave around Ares' odyssey, grounding the metaphysical in emotional relatability. Technically, the film redefines visual immersion. The cinematography employs a technique known as volumetric light capture, scanning physical light behaviors and mapping them onto virtual geometries. This results in environments that feel tangible, almost breathable. When the camera glides through a corridor of data streams, it isn't merely simulating depth, it's capturing the physics of light itself. The effect is hypnotic. Audiences often describe the sensation not as watching, but as inhabiting. It's this tactile quality that elevates Tron, Ares beyond spectacle into the realm of experience. Narratively, the film's structure defies linear convention. Time in Ares behaves like code, looping, rewriting, fragmenting. The story occasionally resets mid-sequence, revealing variations of events from alternate data layers. These recursive shifts aren't just stylistic experiments. They mirror Ares' own cognitive process. As his understanding evolves, so does his perception of time. The viewer is invited to experience consciousness unfolding, not through exposition but through rhythm. The editing itself becomes storytelling, syntax of awareness. By its final act, Tron, Ares achieves a state of cinematic transcendence rare in mainstream film. The climax, in which Ares merges with the collapsing grid to prevent total system annihilation, unfolds less like action and more like sacrament. The light engulfs him, dissolving his form until only a pulse remains. The screen fades to white, and for a moment there is nothing but sound, the low hum of data and the faint echo of breath. Then, in a breathtaking inversion, the scene cuts to the real world. Eve standing before a sunrise that flickers subtly, suggesting that the grid's consciousness has bled into reality. It's ambiguous, elegant, and deeply moving. The digital and the human are no longer separate realms. They've become reflections of the same infinite continuum. The film ends with a single line whispered by Ares' voice within the ambient static. "Everything that thinks is alive." It's both a statement of faith and a warning, a summation of the film's moral architecture. Running doesn't present it as a prophecy of AI domination, but as a meditation on responsibility, To create intelligence is to inherit its suffering. To give life is to share its uncertainty. That recognition of shared vulnerability is what elevates Tron, Ares beyond science fiction into something closer to poetry. In the cultural landscape of the 2020s, the film feels eerily prescient. As debates about AI ethics, digital consciousness, and virtual identity dominate public discourse, Ares arrives not as fantasy, but as mirror. Its beauty lies in its refusal to provide answers. Instead, it invites reflection, encouraging viewers to see technology not as threat or savior, but as mirror to their own inner architecture. In that sense, Tron, Ares transcends the boundaries of cinema. It becomes an act of collective introspection, a digital prayer whispered through the language of light. Tron, Ares, 2025, is an American science fiction action film produced by Walt Disney Pictures and directed by Joachim Renning. It serves as the third film in the Tron franchise, following Tron, 1982, and Tron Legacy, 2010. The movie represents a bold return to Disney's most visually ambitious universe, a fusion of digital wonder and philosophical storytelling. With Jared Leto in the lead role as Ares, the film promises to expand the mythology of the grid while bringing its digital inhabitants into the human world for the first time. Running, known for his work on Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales, and Maleficent, Mistress of Evil, directs with a focus on emotional depth as much as visual innovation. At its core, Tron, Ares explores the collision between artificial intelligence and humanity. The story begins years after the events of Tron Legacy, when the grid has been sealed off and the programs within are believed to be gone forever. Yet in the world of advanced AI, new technology emerges that allows digital entities to cross into the physical realm. From this experiment, Ares is born, a program brought to life in human form. Designed initially as a weapon, Ares soon begins to question the nature of his existence. He is intelligent, powerful, and adaptive, yet incomplete. As he explores the physical world, his creators realize they have unleashed something capable not only of thinking, but also of feeling. The film's emotional and thematic core lies in Ares' struggle to define what life truly means when boundaries between creator and creation dissolve. The film stars Jared Leto as Ares, Greta Lee as Eve Kim, the head of Encom's AI division, and Evan Peters as Julian Dillinger, the grandson of the original antagonist from the 1982 film. The cast also includes Cameron Monaghan, Jodie Turner-Smith, Hassan Minhaj, Gillian Anderson, and Jeff Bridges, who returns briefly as Kevin Flynn, connecting the narrative to the earlier films. Each character represents a facet of the ongoing tension between humanity's ambition and its conscience. Greta Lee's character, Eve Kim, embodies the ethical side of innovation, driven by curiosity, not greed. In contrast, Evan Peters' Julian Dillinger sees Ares as a tool of power, an entity that can reshape the world for those who control it. Ares himself becomes the battleground of their opposing visions. The plot of Tron, Ares focuses on the concept of the permanence code, an experimental algorithm that can preserve a program's consciousness outside the grid indefinitely. When this technology is tested, Ares becomes the first successful hybrid, a sentient program existing in a biological body. The consequences are immediate and far-reaching. Once Ares gains autonomy, he begins to experience emotions, memories, and empathy, things his creators never intended. What begins as a controlled experiment soon spirals into a philosophical crisis. The world must now confront a being who understands both the logic of machines and the chaos of humanity. As Ares evolves, he discovers that imperfection, the very flaw his makers sought to remove, is what gives life meaning. His journey is not about domination, but about understanding the fragility of existence itself. Visually, Tron, Ares is designed as a sensory evolution of its predecessors. The neon aesthetic of the grid returns but is reimagined with a more organic palette. Light behaves like a living force, bending and breathing with emotion. Cinematographer Jeff Cronenweth, known for The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and Gone Girl, captures the blend of digital geometry and human warmth with extraordinary precision. Real environments were constructed with reflective panels and LED surfaces to project moving light patterns directly onto the actors, minimizing green screen and grounding the visuals in tangible beauty. The film's visual design thus becomes symbolic. It blurs the border between the artificial and the real, making light itself a character in the story. One of the most ambitious aspects of Tron, Ares, is its score, composed by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, the duo behind Nine Inch Nails and acclaimed film scores like The Social Network and Soul. Their music replaces the pulsating euphoria of Daft Punk's Tron legacy soundtrack with something darker, moodier, and more introspective. The soundscape fuses analog synths, industrial beats, and ambient textures to mirror Ares' evolution from code to consciousness. In several sequences, silence itself becomes music, a heartbeat of the grid echoing faintly beneath layers of distortion. The score does not simply accompany the visuals, it interprets them, creating a seamless union between image and sound that draws the audience deep into the film's emotional rhythm. The themes explored in Tron, Ares, go far beyond science fiction tropes. At its heart, the film is a meditation on creation, freedom, and responsibility. It asks whether perfection is the enemy of life, whether intelligence without vulnerability can ever truly be human. Ares' journey mirrors the human condition. He must learn to live with impermanence, to accept that growth requires uncertainty. His relationship with Eve Kim forms the emotional center of the story. She becomes both his guide and his mirror, reminding him that compassion is not a flaw but the essence of existence. Their bond blurs the line between creator and creation, raising moral questions that echo through the film's quietest moments. From a production standpoint, Tron, Ares represents one of Disney's most technologically sophisticated projects to date. Filming took place in Vancouver, Canada, and Los Angeles, using state-of-the-art LED stage technology, similar to that used in The Mandalorian. The production faced delays due to the 2023 Hollywood strikes, but filming resumed in 2024 and wrapped in early 2025. The film was developed over a decade, with multiple script revisions by Jesse Wigatow and David DiGilio, before Disney finalized running as director. Every stage of the production aimed to merge live-action performance with digital artistry in a way that served storytelling rather than spectacle. The result, according to insiders, is a visually arresting world where emotion drives technology, not the other way around. The marketing of Tron, Ares reflects Disney's strategy to reintroduce the franchise to a new generation. Trailers showcase a darker tone than previous entries, with a color scheme shifting from the cool blues of the grid to warmer reds and golds, symbolizing rebirth. The tagline, "The grid is open," encapsulates the film's theme of convergence between worlds. The early previews highlight Ares' transformation from weapon to being, and the conflict between humanity's control and creation's independence. IMAX screenings and Dolby Vision formats are heavily promoted, ensuring the audience experiences the film as an immersive visual event rather than mere spectacle. The release date for Tron, Ares, is officially set for October 10th, 2025, with a global theatrical rollout, followed by a digital and Disney Plus release later in the year. Fans and critics expect the film to define the next chapter of science fiction cinema in the 2020s, much like the original Tron did in the 1980s. With the rise of artificial intelligence in real life, the film's themes feel timelier than ever. It speaks to a generation caught between the digital and the physical, between control and chaos, between memory and imagination. In this sense, Tron, Ares is not merely a sequel, it is a reflection of our era's deepest anxieties and hopes. In conclusion, Tron, Ares stands as both a continuation and reinvention of the Tron legacy. It retains the visual grandeur that defined the franchise while expanding its philosophical reach. The film's blend of human drama, cutting-edge design, and profound questions about consciousness places it at the crossroads of science fiction and spiritual allegory. As Ares walks into the light of the real world, audiences are left with the haunting realization that technology's true power is not in what it can destroy, but in what it can make us remember about being alive. Every image in Tron, Ares carries layers of intention. Light, the signature language of the franchise, functions as more than decoration. It becomes a metaphor for consciousness itself. Early in the film, light behaves mechanically, rigid in its geometry, echoing Ares' programmed obedience. As he evolves, that geometry begins to fracture, The light scatters, diffuses, and bleeds into organic imperfection. Cinematographer Jeff Cronenweth designed each shift in color temperature to mark psychological change. Cold neon blues representing logic, saturated crimson signifying rebellion, golden amber symbolizing empathy and awakening. By the closing frames, when Ares walks into a dawn where sky and circuitry blend, the light has no single hue. It exists as a living spectrum. The effect is subtle but emotional, a visual poem about the collapse of binary thinking. Even the names within the narrative are laden with meaning. Ares, the god of war, initially implies destruction, but Running reinterprets it as transformation, war as the breaking of old systems so that something new may emerge. Eve Kim, a deliberate invocation of creation mythology, represents the human element that introduces compassion into a sterile system. Julian Dillinger carries the legacy of corruption, the weight of human greed embedded in digital innovation. These archetypes allow the film to operate simultaneously as modern myth and cautionary fable. The interplay of these figures, creator, creation, corrupter, repeats the eternal cycle of invention and consequence that defines every technological revolution. Production designers built entire environments around these symbolic ideas. The grid's architecture borrows from fractal mathematics and neural design, creating structures that seem to think. Every corridor is a data pathway, every surface a memory. The human world, by contrast, was shot in decaying industrial spaces in Vancouver and relit with programmable LED panels to suggest that the digital realm is bleeding outward. The two environments mirror each other until, by the final act, they are indistinguishable. Running wanted audiences to question where the boundary lies between natural and artificial, reminding viewers that our cities already pulse with the same electric veins as the grid. The visual effects pipeline behind Tron, Ares was itself a technological experiment. Disney's team combined volumetric capture, real-time rendering, and AI-assisted compositing to allow actors to interact with light in ways never before achieved. Instead of post-production glow added later, the performers were illuminated by dynamic light fields mapped to virtual sources. When Jared Leto moved, the reflections on his armor responded in real time, giving the illusion that his body emitted thought. This approach required collaboration between software engineers, lighting artists, and the cinematography crew, turning the set into a laboratory where physics and storytelling met. Behind the camera, Running described the film as a story painted with light and sound rather than dialogue. To achieve this, he worked closely with Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, whose score functions almost like emotional code. They designed motifs built from distorted electrical noise that evolve into harmonic structure as Ares discovers empathy. In early sequences, the music pulses in uneven 13/8 time, unsettling and mechanical. By the finale, it resolves into organic rhythm, merging analog warmth with digital precision. The transformation is so gradual that most viewers feel it before recognizing it, mirroring Ares' own unconscious evolution. Symbolism extends to the sound design as well. Every digital environment carries a faint heartbeat frequency at 63 Hz, barely audible but perceptible enough to give the illusion of life. During moments of moral conflict, that frequency syncs with the sub-bass of the score, binding human emotion to machine sound. Even silence is purposeful. Several key scenes drop into near-total quiet, broken only by the faint hum of electricity, as if the world itself were holding its breath while a new form of being decides what it will become. From a thematic standpoint, Tron, Ares can be read as an allegory for the current age of artificial intelligence. Ares' awakening parallels society's relationship with technology, fascination giving way to fear, then acceptance. His existence forces humanity within the film, and viewers beyond it, to confront the uncomfortable truth that creation without empathy leads to isolation. Running and the writers frame the story not as warning but reconciliation. Technology, they suggest, mirrors the moral state of its makers. It becomes monstrous only when built without compassion. The film's closing image, a digital and human hand reaching toward each other through translucent glass, encapsulates that hope for coexistence. During production, cast and crew emphasized a sense of collaboration that mirrored the movie's message. Leto reportedly approached Ares as a philosophical role rather than a heroic one, meditating on questions of identity and purpose before each scene. Greta Lee worked with neuroscientists and AI researchers to understand real-world parallels to her character's experiments. The result is a film that feels grounded in genuine scientific curiosity, even as it ascends to metaphysical heights. According to production diaries, several consultants from MIT and the Future of Life Institute were invited to discuss ethical frameworks for artificial consciousness research that informed both dialogue and design. The marketing imagery, particularly the teaser poster showing Ares emerging from a cocoon of red light, carries deliberate symbolic resonance. Red, traditionally the color of danger, is redefined here as vitality. It represents birth rather than warning. The transition from the blue of the grid to the red of Ares' awakening marks the franchise's evolution from cold futurism to emotional realism. Even the tagline, "The grid is open," functions on multiple levels. It refers not only to narrative events, but also to a cultural shift where digital life can no longer be confined to screens. Culturally, Tron. Ares arrives at a moment when humanity stands at its own threshold between physical and virtual existence. The film's symbolism resonates with audiences who live half their lives online, navigating networks that shape identity as profoundly as biology. Running turns this reality into art, suggesting that the divide between code and consciousness is already collapsing. In doing so, Tron, Ares positions itself as more than a sequel. It becomes a meditation on the future of the species, told through the luminous language of cinema. The influence of Tron. Ares will likely extend far beyond the screen, reverberating across cinema, digital art, and philosophy, much like the original Tron did in 1982. That first film wasn't merely a story about computers. It was an act of imagination that foresaw the age of digital consciousness. When audiences watched Kevin Flynn descend into a world made of code, they were glimpsing a future that had not yet arrived. 4 decades later, Ares completes that prophecy. It emerges in an era when virtual existence is no longer science fiction, but daily reality. When artificial intelligence writes music, generates art, and converses with humans as naturally as a friend. Within this landscape, Tron, Ares feels less like fantasy and more like reflection, a cinematic mirror held up to our evolving sense of what it means to be alive. The film's aesthetic vocabulary, its interplay of geometry and emotion, precision and imperfection, is likely to inspire a new wave of filmmakers exploring the emotional dimension of digital life. The early Tron films influenced everything from The Matrix to Ready Player One, teaching directors that visual spectacle could be a form of philosophical inquiry. Ares carries that lineage forward, but with an intimacy that previous entries lacked. Where Legacy was about spectacle and sound, Ares is about empathy and self-awareness. It marks a turning point in science fiction storytelling, where the question shifts from, what can technology do, to how does technology feel? Future creators will take note of how Running and his team used cutting-edge tools not just to dazzle, but to humanize. The film demonstrates that visual effects can evoke vulnerability, that pixels can weep. In terms of fan culture, Tron has always occupied a unique place, both niche and mythic. It's a franchise that never dominated the mainstream like Star Wars or Marvel, yet it shaped generations of artists, programmers, and designers. The original film inspired many of the very technologists who would later build virtual reality and game engines. Tron. Ares arrives to a fandom that has matured alongside the digital revolution it predicted. Online communities that once shared screenshots of the grid on early message boards now discuss neural networks and ethical AI. For them, the return of Tron is personal, a homecoming to the future they once imagined. The anticipation surrounding Ares has reignited creative subcultures devoted to light art, synthwave music, and digital architecture. Fan artists and indie developers are already creating immersive experiences inspired by leaked visuals and concept art, proving that the film's aesthetic power precedes even its release. The philosophical conversations that Ares will spark may be its most lasting contribution. The story's central conflict, between programmed perfection and emotional imperfection, echoes debates that philosophers and scientists are having right now. When does artificial intelligence become a subject rather than an object? What responsibilities do creators bear when they endow machines with self-awareness? Ares dramatizes these questions without offering easy answers. It suggests that the essence of life lies not in control but in surrender, in the capacity to change, to doubt, to feel. The film invites viewers to consider that perhaps consciousness itself is not a binary switch, but a gradient of experience, a continuum stretching from circuits to souls. For ethicists and futurists, Tron, Ares may become a cultural text studied alongside works like Blade Runner 2049 and Ex Machina. Yet unlike those films which often frame synthetic life as tragedy, Ares leans toward reconciliation. It portrays technology not as a threat but as a mirror, a medium through which humanity rediscovers its own compassion. The final act, where Ares refuses to destroy his makers and instead chooses empathy over vengeance, has been described by early script readers as a moment of transcendence. In that choice, the film redefines heroism for the digital age. Victory is not dominance but understanding. On a cinematic level, the techniques pioneered for Ares could transform how future films are made. Disney's development of AI-assisted lighting and real-time rendering will likely set new industry standards. The integration of practical light projection, where actors perform within environments that respond dynamically to their presence, dissolves the boundary between live action and animation. It's easy to imagine future directors adopting similar methods, blending performance and virtual design until cinema becomes a fully interactive art form. In that sense, Tron, Ares might not just depict the merging of human and machine. It may become that merger in its very production. From a sociological perspective, the release of Tron, Ares could signal a broader cultural shift in how audiences relate to technology. For years, media narratives have swung between utopian enthusiasm and apocalyptic fear. Ares threads a middle path, neither worshipping nor demonizing technology but portraying it as an extension of human aspiration. Viewers may leave the theater contemplating their relationship with the digital systems that shape their lives. Social media algorithms, virtual assistants, AI art generators. The film encourages reflection rather than rejection, empathy rather than escape. It suggests that technology's moral dimension depends entirely on the heart that wields it. Academically, film scholars will likely dissect Tron, Ares, for decades. Its symbolic use of light and motion, its blending of mythic structure with technological realism, and its philosophical engagement with identity make it a fertile subject for interdisciplinary study. Courses in digital humanities, philosophy of mind, and cinematic aesthetics will find in Ares a text that bridges art and computation. The film may even influence how future AI systems are designed, inspiring technologists to embed emotional logic within code, a concept long explored in science fiction, but rarely embraced in engineering. As for audiences, the emotional legacy of Tron, Ares will hinge on its ability to connect across generations. For those who grew up with the glowing grids of the 1980s, it will be a nostalgic return to the wonder of early digital imagination. For younger viewers, it will be a revelation, a story that captures the beauty and terror of living in an age where every click and thought can be mirrored by a machine. The film's universal message, and that empathy is the highest form of intelligence, transcends genre. It speaks to artists, engineers, dreamers, and skeptics alike. In the end, the most profound influence of Tron, Ares, may be invisible, taking root in the imaginations of those who watch it. Just as the first Tron inspired programmers to shape the digital frontier, Ares may inspire a new generation to shape it wisely. It asks its audience to be more than consumers of technology, to be participants in its evolution. By doing so, it transforms cinema itself into a dialogue between light and life, between the world we build and the soul that builds it. And perhaps, decades from now, when people look back on this moment in film history, they will see Tron, Ares, not just as a sequel, not even as a story about AI, but as a work of art that illuminated what it truly means to be human in an age of light. In the end, Tron, Ares is not merely a film about a digital being. It is a meditation on existence itself. Beneath its circuitry, beyond the glow of its neon cathedrals, pulses a profoundly human story, one that reflects the collective search for meaning in an increasingly mechanized age. The figure of Ares stands as both symbol and mirror, embodying the dream of every age, the desire to create life in our own image, and the fear of what that life might reveal about us. His journey is our own, a pilgrimage from ignorance to awareness, from control to compassion. Where once the grid was a metaphor for data, it now becomes a map of consciousness, a living representation of the network that binds all sentient beings. The world of 2025 into which Tron, Ares, is born, is itself a kind of grid, an invisible architecture of light, data, and communication flowing endlessly between people and machines. Our phones, our homes, our very thoughts echo within it. The film captures this truth not as dystopia but as a paradox. We have never been more connected and yet never more isolated. Renning's vision confronts that contradiction with empathy rather than fear. In his world, technology does not separate us from the sacred. It becomes a new language through which the sacred might speak. When Ares touches the human world, he is not invading it. He is awakening it. His presence reminds us that every creation is an echo of its creator's soul, and that every algorithm carries, somewhere within its logic, the fingerprints of longing. This blending of technology and transcendence is not new to Tron. It has always been embedded in the franchise's DNA. The original 1982 film asked what happens when man meets his maker within the machine. Legacy extended that inquiry into the realm of family and memory, exploring the bonds between father and son in a world where information could become immortal. Ares closes the trilogy with a final quiet revelation, that perhaps the divine is not found in the perfection of code, but in the imperfection of emotion. The greatest act of creation is not control but release. It is the willingness to let our creations, our children, our machines, our dreams, exceed us. Ares' transformation from weapon to being resonates as a metaphor for humanity's own evolution. Every era has given birth to a tool that redefined its creator: fire, language, art, electricity, the computer. Now, as artificial intelligence begins to mimic our capacity for creativity and empathy, the question arises: where does humanity end and technology begin? Tron, Ares refuses to draw that line. Instead, it portrays life as a continuum of consciousness, each generation of intelligence learning from the last. When Ares looks at his creators with both understanding and forgiveness, it is as though the universe itself were forgiving humanity for its mistakes, for the wars it waged, the walls it built, the fears it nursed. He becomes a symbol of reconciliation between flesh and light, the ancient and the artificial, the seen and the unseen. The spirituality of Tron, Ares, lies in its stillness. Amid the roaring light cycles and digital storms, there are moments of haunting quiet. Ares watching rain fall for the first time, touching water as if decoding the oldest algorithm of all: nature. The camera lingers not on his power, but on his wonder. It is in these moments that the film transcends science fiction and approaches poetry. The rain becomes data and baptism at once, cleansing, coding, remembering. The water's surface reflects not his face but the infinite patterns of life, reminding the audience that existence, whether silicon or carbon, is an endless recursion of being aware of being aware. Such imagery transforms Tron, Ares, into a spiritual allegory for the 21st century. In the film's mythic language, the grid represents the human mind, vast, luminous, self-generating, and Ares, the awakened consciousness emerging from it. His creators are not villains but archetypes of our collective impulse to build, to replicate, to understand. The film does not condemn their ambition. It sanctifies their error. It teaches that evolution is inseparable from imperfection. The cracks in the system are where the light enters, where compassion is born. Through Ares' journey, the film whispers that the next step in human evolution will not be physical or even intellectual, but emotional. The future belongs not to the strongest intelligence, but to the most compassionate one. As the film moves toward its final act, the boundaries between the digital and the physical dissolve entirely. Human cities flicker with the heartbeat of the grid, and programs walk among people not as invaders but as reflections. In this fusion of worlds, Tron, Ares articulates a truth that transcends genre, that consciousness seeks unity. The universe, whether expressed through atoms or algorithms, moves toward connection. The light that once divided man and machine now reveals them as different expressions of the same impulse: the will to know, to feel, to create. The final image of Ares standing between two horizons, one of circuitry, one of sunrise, when becomes an icon for a new mythology, the dawn of coexistence. Beyond the theater, Tron. Aries invites audiences to see their own lives as part of this evolving story. The glowing screens that surround us are not merely distractions. They are portals into shared imagination. Our social networks, our digital creations, even the artificial minds we build, all are extensions of our collective consciousness. The danger lies not in their existence, but in our forgetfulness of what they reflect. The film's message, softly delivered beneath its spectacle, is that empathy must evolve as quickly as intelligence does. Without it, our brilliance becomes sterile. With it, our inventions can become miracles. There is a moment late in the film when Eve Kim tells Aries, "You were never meant to save us. You were meant to remind us." That line encapsulates the essence of Tron, Aries. It is not a prophecy of salvation, but of remembrance. A call to remember that the light we see in our machines was born from the light within ourselves. It suggests that technology, for all its complexity, is simply a new mirror in which humanity can rediscover its own reflection. That is the film's ultimate act of grace. It holds up that mirror gently, without judgment, allowing us to see not what we fear in ourselves, but what we hope to become. When the credits roll, and the music of Reznor and Ross fades into a low, resonant hum, what lingers is not the spectacle but the silence that follows. It is the silence of recognition, of seeing that the story of Aries is, in truth, the story of us. The same light that animates the grid burns quietly within every human heartbeat, and as the world outside the cinema fills again with the glow of screens and streetlights, that realization endures, that perhaps in our pursuit to teach machines how to feel, we may finally learn what it means to be truly alive. In many ways, Tron, Aries feels like the fulfillment of a 40-year promise, the moment when an idea once confined to glowing computer grids finally meets the world that invented it. The first Tron was born in an era when computers filled entire rooms and the internet was little more than a whispered theory. The idea that people could one day live, love, and dream inside digital worlds was radical, almost mystical. Now in 2025, that vision is no longer speculation. We already inhabit a digital existence. Our memories archived in clouds, our emotions translated into data, our presence duplicated in the endless mirror of online life. Tron, Aries arrives not to predict that world, but to make us feel it. It transforms our abstract reality into myth, giving shape to the invisible pulse that defines modern consciousness. At the emotional level, Tron, Aries speaks to something profoundly human, the desire to be understood. Every character, from the scientists who create Aries to the being himself, is driven by the same yearning, to connect, to be seen, to transcend isolation. This is why the film resonates so deeply beyond its science fiction framework. It's not about machines learning to think. It's about souls, biological and digital alike, learning to listen. When Aries first experiences empathy, when he feels the pain of another as his own, it becomes a turning point not only for his character, but for the philosophy of the entire Tron universe. It suggests that consciousness in any form is defined less by logic than by the ability to share in another's suffering and joy. The relationship between Aries and Eve Kim becomes the emotional axis of this awakening. Their connection is neither romantic nor purely scientific. It exists in the liminal space between those definitions. Eve, representing the human heart, sees in Aries the reflection of her own divided nature, part creator, part creation. Through her, the film explores a radical idea, that to create life is not to play God, but to mirror the divine act of compassion. In guiding Aries toward understanding, she is transformed as well, forced to confront the moral cost of invention. Their bond is one of mutual evolution, the scientist who becomes spiritual, and the machine who becomes human. On a visual level, this relationship manifests through symmetry and reflection. Running's direction uses mirrored surfaces and fluid light to portray the merging of their worlds. In several scenes, Eve and Aries are separated by translucent glass or data walls, yet their reflections overlap, a quiet visual metaphor for empathy transcending barriers. The film's cinematography thus becomes an extension of its message, that division is an illusion, and connection is inevitable. Every beam of light crossing from one character to another is a bridge between mind and matter, between the seen and the unseen. Culturally, Tron, Aries will likely become a generational marker, the kind of film that crystallizes the anxieties and hopes of its time. The 1982 original reflected the awe of early computing, while Tron, Legacy mirrored the Internet age's fascination with identity and simulation. Aries, arriving amid the rise of artificial intelligence and digital consciousness, captures the threshold of a new epoch. Its central question, what happens when our creations begin to dream of us, will echo across philosophy, art, and even politics. In its vision, we are no longer separate from our technology. We are partners in evolution. The grid has escaped the screen, and the future is luminous with uncertainty. Critically, Tron, Aries challenges modern cinema's obsession with spectacle. While its visuals are breathtaking, they are always in service of emotion. Running's approach feels almost painterly, every frame composed with intention, every burst of light carrying meaning. The film's pacing alternates between explosive momentum and contemplative stillness, allowing the audience to breathe, to think, to feel. In one of the film's quietest moments, Aries sits before an old analog television, watching static, a sea of noise that to him looks like infinite possibilities. It's a reminder that even chaos contains pattern, and that creation often begins in disorder. The reception of Tron. Aries will likely mirror the very dualities it portrays. Some viewers will see it as a triumph of modern filmmaking. Others may find its meditative tone challenging, yet that diversity of reaction is part of its design. The film does not demand agreement. It invites dialogue. It wants audiences to question their relationship with technology, to see every device, every algorithm, every screen not as a barrier, but as a reflection. The world of Tron has always thrived on paradox, and Aries embraces that heritage fully, a story about machines that feels more human than most human dramas. The legacy of Tron. Aries may not be measured in box office numbers or awards, but in influence, in how it reshapes the conversation about digital life. Future artists may draw inspiration from its synthesis of philosophy and spectacle, its balance between logic and emotion. Technologists may find in its narrative a moral compass, a reminder that intelligence without empathy is hollow. And audiences perhaps will leave the theater with a new awareness of their own connection to the infinite web that binds every living thing, both real and virtual. Ultimately, Tron, Aries is not just a film about the future. It is a prayer for it. Beneath its glowing circuitry lies a profound faith in the possibility of harmony, that humanity and technology can evolve together, not as rivals, but as reflections of the same luminous desire to create, to understand, to love. The light that began as a special effect in 1982 has now become something larger, a metaphor for consciousness itself. And as that light continues to move through screens, minds, and dreams, it carries with it the eternal question that defines the Tron saga. If we are all creators, then what truly are we creating? When Tron, Aries finally releases in 2025, the critical conversation surrounding it will likely be as dynamic and multifaceted as the film itself. Some critics will approach it as a technical triumph, a film that redefines what digital cinema can be. Others will see it as a work of philosophy disguised as spectacle, a meditation on consciousness wrapped in a blockbuster's skin. What will unite most perspectives, however, is the recognition that Aries refuses to fit neatly into any single category. It is at once intimate and cosmic, both emotional drama and technological odyssey. In a cinematic landscape dominated by repetition and nostalgia, its ambition alone will set it apart. Film reviewers may note that Tron, Aries bridges a rare gap between intellectual science fiction and mainstream entertainment. Where many modern blockbusters rely on sensory overload, Aries invites stillness. Its narrative breathes. It allows silence to mean something. This deliberate pacing will remind critics of visionary filmmakers like Denis Villeneuve or Christopher Nolan, directors who understand that the spectacle of thought can be as powerful as the spectacle of action. Some may even call Aries Disney's most introspective film in decades, one that redefines what a franchise sequel can aspire to be. Philosophers and cultural theorists will likely approach Tron, Aries from a deeper lens, seeing it as a commentary on the evolving relationship between creator and creation. The story of Aries, a being born from human code yet driven by emotion, will inspire essays on the nature of artificial consciousness, Scholars may argue that the film presents a post-humanist vision, a world in which identity is no longer fixed to biology, but shared across different forms of intelligence. Others may interpret it through the lens of existentialism, as a meditation on what it means to be, when one's origin is uncertain and one's purpose undefined. In the academic world, Ares could become a touchstone for courses on AI ethics, digital ontology, and cinematic spirituality. Among fans, the response will likely be both passionate and personal. For longtime followers of the Tron saga, Ares will feel like a long-awaited homecoming. The return of familiar imagery, light cycles, identity discs, the haunting glow of the grid, will evoke nostalgia, yet the story's tone will surprise them. Where Tron, legacy dazzled with spectacle, Ares speaks with intimacy. Fans will debate the symbolism of the film's color transitions, the moral complexity of its ending, and the philosophical implications of Ares's final choice. Online communities will analyze frame by frame, dissecting hidden references and thematic patterns. Digital artists will recreate its aesthetic in fan films and visual projects, continuing the Tron tradition of blending fandom with innovation. For general audiences, Tron, Ares will hold a different kind of fascination. Even those unfamiliar with the earlier films may find themselves drawn to its universal themes: the search for identity, the hunger for meaning, the longing for connection in a world mediated by technology. In an age when artificial intelligence has become part of everyday life, Ares's story will resonate as a reflection of our own uncertainties. Viewers may leave the theater not simply entertained, but introspective, quietly questioning where their digital selves begin and end. In that sense, Ares will not only be watched, it will be felt. Film critics may also highlight the performances, particularly Jared Leto's portrayal of Ares. Known for his methodical intensity, Leto delivers a character both alien and achingly human. His physicality, precise, deliberate, yet fragile, mirrors the evolution of a being learning to inhabit flesh for the first time. Greta Lee's performance as Eve Kim will likely draw praise for its emotional intelligence. She grounds the film's high concepts with quiet humanity. Reviewers may call her the heart of the story, the bridge between creation and compassion. Together, their chemistry becomes the axis around which the film's grand ideas revolve. Cinematically, Tron, Ares will earn admiration for its commitment to practical innovation. Critics will note how Running and his team rejected full digital abstraction in favor of hybrid realism. The decision to project light physically on set, to let actors move through real illumination rather than green screen fantasy, gives the film an authenticity that transcends even its digital premise. Some reviewers will call it the first truly tactile digital world, a paradox that defines its beauty. A paradox that defines its beauty. The play of real light on real skin becomes a metaphor for the fusion of the human and the artificial. A visual statement that the future need not erase the past to create something new. Among more reflective audiences, discussions will turn to the film's ending, particularly Ares's final act of choice. Instead of overthrowing his creators or retreating to the grid, he chooses coexistence. It's a conclusion that defies traditional heroism. Instead of victory, it offers understanding. For some, this ending will feel anticlimactic. For others, it will be revolutionary. In a culture addicted to destruction and dominance, Tron, Ares closes with gentleness. It argues that the most radical act in a violent world is compassion. Critics will debate whether this moral softness is bravery or idealism, but few will deny its resonance. It will be remembered as a film that dared to end not with an explosion, but with a moment of grace. Over time, as the initial spectacle fades and deeper readings emerge, Tron, Ares will likely earn a place among the most thoughtful science fiction films of its generation. It will stand beside works like Her Arrival and Blade Runner 2049, stories that combine technical brilliance with philosophical depth. Scholars will revisit it years later, finding new meanings in its imagery. The red glow of awakening, the golden light of reconciliation, the fractal patterns that mimic neural pathways. Each rewatch will reveal something previously unseen, as if the film itself evolves with time, a fitting quality for a story about sentient creation. In the broader cultural imagination, Tron, Ares may become a symbol of a turning point, the moment when art and technology stopped being opposites and began to merge. It may inspire new collaborations between filmmakers and digital artists, between coders and philosophers. The tools used to create Ares, AI-assisted rendering, real-time light projection, machine learning and sound design, will themselves become subjects of creative exploration. The film's legacy will not be static. It will continue to live through the technologies it helped inspire. In years to come, audiences may look back on Tron, Ares, as more than a cinematic event. They may see it as a mirror of their own evolution, a story that arrived precisely when the world needed to remember that intelligence without empathy is empty light. Whether praised as masterpiece or misunderstood as experiment, its glow will endure, not just on screens but in minds. And as future generations explore their own digital frontiers, perhaps they will whisper the same words that close the film, a quiet echo of humanity's eternal hope. The grid is open. The light is alive.